Okay, well, let's get this show on the road then. Good evening and welcome to the regular board meeting of the Delta Board of Education. Before we begin the meeting, I would like to first acknowledge the traditional territory of the Tsawwassen and Musqueam First Nations and of all the Hunkaminam speaking people who have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. I would also like to offer my respect to all the elders who have gone before us and to all Canadians who are on the journey of reconciliation. At this time, I'd like to introduce each of the trustees, and when I mention your name, would you please say present and wave so that those who are watching online can see you. Vice Chair Daniel Boisvert.
Good evening, everyone.
Trustee Erica Beard. She'll be joining us in a minute because I know she's here. Trustee Laura Dixon.
Hello.
Trustee Jesse Dosanjh.
Good evening.
Trustee Nick Kanakis.
Good evening.
Trustee Bruce Reed.
Good evening.
We do have a quorum for the meeting. And we also have representation from our education partners who are participating via this Zoom. So I'm not sure if anyone is here from the Delta Teachers Association. We hadn't heard back from them, but if so, welcome. From QP 1091, and they've brought a quorum tonight. So are you having a meeting at your place, Dawn? So we have QP President Dawn Frederickson, Kevin Pencer, who is the first vice president. Look at that. Yes, you are. First Vice President, Petra Hoy, who's second Vice President, Kim Barnes, who's the leadership steward, or the lead shop steward, Beatrice Dempsey, who's the recording secretary, Cindy Smith, who's a trustee. Well, welcome QP 1091. Yes, you win the award for the greatest number of employee partner groups. Is anyone from DPAC here? No, okay. From the Delta principals and vice principals, we have Erin Akuni, who is the principal of North Delta Secondary, and John Paveo, who's the principal of Delta Secondary. Oh, did I say you were? Erin is North Delta Secondary, John Paveo is Delta Secondary. Okay, and getting right into the meeting, could I please have a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated?
So moved.
Yanakis and seconded Trustee Dosanjh. All those in favor of the agenda is circulated. Those opposed, the motion is carried. At this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to the National Day of Mourning. And is someone going to introduce our speaker, or I didn't get a name there, I'm sorry.
Chair Windsor, do you want me to introduce Joanne?
Absolutely. Yes, I was going to turn it over to you if there was a senior staff member who was doing it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing QP 1091 to present on the Day of Mourning. And I'd like to introduce Joanne Gill. She's our third Vice President for Health and Safety. And Joanne's here, and I'll leave it for her to do the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dawn. Chairperson Windsor, Superintendent Shepherd, trustees, staff, and guests, thank you for this opportunity to make this presentation on behalf of the 900 QP 1091 Delta School District support staff. My name is Joanne Gill, and I am the third Vice President of the Union and the Occupational Health and Safety Officer. The National Day of Mourning is observed in Canada each year on April 28th. This year marks the third Workers' Day of Mourning since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although we are rolling back public health measures, we know that workers need to continue to keep themselves safe at work. Measures to increase ventilation, limit capacity, and prevent COVID-positive people from entering our workplaces must remain in force. When workers must do their jobs in the proximity of people with suspected or confirmed cases of COVID, adequate personal protective equipment must be provided and required. 40 years ago, the Canadian Labour of Congress members created this day to remember workers who lost their lives on the job and to inspire others to advocate to to prevent further measures and tragedies. The date, April 28th, was chosen because on this day in 1914, the Workers' Compensation Act received its third reading in Parliament, and now over 100 countries observe this day around the world. As we approach this day, I would like to ask us to remember the 3 CUPE members we lost this year due to illness. An EA, Leslie Sharp, who died on December 1st, 2021. Joel Panadu, who's a custodian, who died December 2nd, 2021, and Walter Giesbrecht, who is also an EA, who died April 4th, 2022. We stand in solidarity with them, their loved ones, colleagues, and friends. CUPE Local 1091 respectfully requests that the Delta School District once again declare April 28th a day of mourning in our workplace. This year, we will raise the CUPE Day of Mourning flag at the school board office for April 28th, but will not be holding a ceremony to do it. We will join others around the world to renew our resolve to demand healthier and safer workplaces as we remember and honor those who have been injured or killed at work. Thank you very much for this opportunity to make this presentation tonight.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Safety of all employees is such a vital part of the workplace responsibility. And we are so sorry that you have lost 3 members and we have lost 3 employees. And ironically, I know 2 of those 3 have worked with them. So it's, yes. Trustee Dixon.
Chair Windsor, I don't know if we need a motion, but it can't hurt to entrench April 28th. So I'd like to move that we do have the CUPE Day of Mourning flag raised in front of the board office on April 28th.
Thank you. And is there a seconder to that motion? Trustee Reed, is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? And the motion is carried unanimously. And thank you so much for the presentation. It's an annual reminder that needs to be practiced every day in the workplace. Thank you so much. Okay, I will turn the wellness survey presentation over to our HR Director, Judy Miranda, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Chair Windsor, and good evening, everyone. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Nicole Braid to you this evening. Nicole joined the Employee Services team over a year ago, and one of her portfolio responsibilities is to provide leadership and oversight to our employee wellness strategy. This evening, she's going to share with you some of the data that came out of our employee wellness survey. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Nicole Braid.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'm going to share my screen as I share with you the results of our survey today. Before I start sharing the results of the survey, I'd like to just start with part of the reasons why, and just from the brief presentation before, why the importance of health and wellness for our employee groups stands very firmly in the vision of 2030, as we really want an innovative, inclusive community where all people belong and everyone soars. And in that place is our well-being and our mental health flourish. And as we move from there, from that stepping toward our realizing Vision 2030, came our district goals from our strategic plan.
For a second.
And from the engaged, empowered, and healthy workforce, which is our district goal number 4, we really took that and decided to come up with a framework of how we can really decide and find alignment with thriving employees within our system. We know our employees are our most valuable resource, and creating innovative and healthy working environments is exactly what we need to be doing. So what we did is we took that framework of self, site, and system, and we connected it with our district goal and our district vision. Self being a well individual, being a healthy individual and taking care of yourself and your physical and mental well-being. Having a healthy workspace where when you go to work every day, having positive professional relationships and vision, purpose, and connection. And then having the system that helps support all of it with our district department's skills and training and being able to bring the very best to your work. Well, with those three elements that really help our environments and how we go through that, we decided that we wanted to dive in deeper. How can we find more ways to support employee wellness as we go forward? So as we did that, we took those three elements and we created questions that come over an overall mental health and wellness survey. We conducted this survey this past few months ago, from February 9th to March 11th. We had a total of 924 of our just over 2,200 employees respond to our survey. As our largest employee group, we had 61% of those 924 people were our teachers and our TTOCs. 32% were our support staff, 4% our vice principals and principals, and 2% were our exempt employees. One thing to note that during this survey was February 9th to March 11th, 2022, coming up on the second anniversary of the beginning of the pandemic, coming into the middle of the Omicron wave that was hitting our province. And so throughout this survey, you will find that we knew that we were going to be hearing the voices of those people who've been deeply affected by the pandemic. We knew that those voices were going to be loud and clear. And so throughout this survey, we have people who have been deeply affected by it. Wearing a mask every day, all day, is really taking a toll on my mental health. I can't seem to connect with students in the same way I did pre-pandemic. And I attribute that to not being able to see their faces. Another comment that was made was the pandemic has made teaching a lot less fun. It feels like all the perks of teaching, getting to know kids, encouraging community building, and after-school interests have been reduced significantly. So throughout this survey, we knew that we were going to have this as a thread. But we also believe that this is the best place to start because we need to meet our people where they are right now in terms of their wellness. So we decided with our questions that were surrounding the person's self and how well an individual is. We found some very interesting numbers coming up through here. 88% of people feel that they're doing their job quite effectively, even through these troubling times. They're getting it done. They're being really effective. 76%, the majority of people enjoy coming to work. 60% of our respondents feel comfortable talking about their mental health. And so that's a number that we may like to dive into a little bit deeper about being comfortable with that topic. 58% feel that they have a pretty clear understanding of what's offered to them. But we did find that 48% of people are not great about taking time for themselves, and they only regularly take time for themselves. And so that's another sort of piece to this, that sort of being well individual when you start to work. And 26% of our respondents were likely to engage in an EFAP, an Employee Family Assistance Program, if they needed mental health service. So there are some interesting ways that we're going to dive into some of that and looking at those numbers and seeing where we can increase some of those. In the questions that we created for the site and having a healthy work community, we found that 70% of people feel that someone in their workplace, that they've got someone there to talk to if they start to feel overwhelmed. 79% feel that they belong in their workplace. 42% believe that their well-being is a priority, where 69% feel valued and 72% feel connected to their colleagues. And as we moved on through to the system, where these are the resources that we and the support that we need to be able to do the best in our job. Well, 89% feel that they are really suited to the work that they're doing. The skills that they have are matching the job that they're doing right now. 68% feel that they've been given good opportunities for learning and development. And 50% so we also would like to see some additional training opportunities, and 50% also support an increase in positive mental health strategies for our workplaces. It's interesting. So with those three elements that we have, our district employee wellness committee has come together, and we are working through those three elements of self, site, and system. And through self, we look at pieces where we can create more promotion of maintaining good mental and physical health and access to services. Starting next week will be our campaign for the Canadian Mental Health Association, Mental Health Week. And starting with May 2nd to 8th, we'll be doing a campaign of just looking at empathy and how empathy can help increase mental health, giving it to yourself, giving it to others and giving it to yourself. Through the element of sight, looking at professional relationships and connections in that workplace and trying to strengthen them through these times. And through the system, additional training and support for those positive mental health strategies for workplaces that people said that they would be interested in having as part of their work. So just to wrap up about what we found in our survey this year, employee wellness is more than just the absence of illness. It's about optimizing the health of all of our employees and the various elements, those three elements that we found were most important to people: being a well individual, having a healthy workspace to go to, and having the resources and support to do the best at your job. Taking a look at those three elements and the various things that impact those elements, we found that that's where we need to address some things and look a little bit deeper with our wellness committee. Thank you very much for your time tonight, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Trustees, are there any comments or questions to Nicole? Trustee Dixon.
Thank you so much for bringing this forward. It's an interesting baseline to start with, and I'm hoping that over time we'll get some longitudinal data. You know, it sure be nice to see those numbers of people who feel valued in their workplace or connected with others, you know, to see those numbers hopefully start to shift. And it's a comment I had earlier about some other data we were going through. I think the process of just articulating and having this conversation through survey helps center this conversation and helps make it makes it more explicit that, you know, these are the things that we value. So I think that will start the ball rolling, and then of course we're looking at strategies, and we hope to be able to move the dial. But I really appreciate the evidence that we can look at and check and see if we're actually being successful in moving this along. Some of the numbers surprised me. Some of them I hope to see improve, and some of them are I think quite healthy looking already. But there's obviously some work to be done. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Other comments, trustees? I just like to comment that students are talking the same language when you're talking about empathy, because Trustee Dosanjh will speak a little bit later about the Delta Youth Advisory Council meeting where empathy was the buzzword of that particular meeting. So empathy is huge in the whole scheme of things. So not only do we want worker safety, we want worker wellness. Thank you so much, Nicole, and I'm looking forward to see what steps take place next to move us down this very, very wholesome path. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, before we carry on with the meeting, and I'm not going to jinx it by saying it could be a quick one. Oh, did I say that? Anyways, so just a reminder, there will be a question period of no more than 30 minutes at the end of this meeting. Questions are limited to topics that are on the agenda. We will take questions from members of the public present in the room first, and then we'll move to questions from those who are watching online. For those of you who are watching online, you can view the agenda by visiting the board meeting page on the Delta School District website. If you would like to submit questions for consideration during the question period, please email them to questions@deltaschools.ca. questions@deltaschools.ca. Before the question period starts. Your name and question will be read out and answered in the order in which it was received. There is a short time delay of 10 to 20 seconds between when we speak and when it's broadcast on the YouTube live stream. And for that reason, I'd encourage you to send in your questions as soon as possible. And hopefully we won't run into any technical difficulties this evening. However, if the live stream stops working for any reason, we will post an updated link to a new live stream on our website. In the event that this should happen, we will halt the meeting for a short moment in order to allow those watching online to reconnect. Thank you. And trustees, moving on to the agenda. The next thing is the approval of the minutes. Could I please have someone move adoption of the minutes as circulated? Trustee Boisvert and seconded trustee Kanakis. Are there any errors or omissions? No, all those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We have no unfinished business, but I'm sure we have a lot to report out because this has been a pretty busy board for the last couple of weeks. So who would like to go first? Trustee Boisvert.
Only because I didn't see any other hands launching into the air.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair Windsor. As we attended the annual AGM for BCSTA this past weekend. So I was there, of course, with you and Trustee Dixon and Trustee Kanakis. And it was a very powerful day on Friday. And there were definitely some highlights for me. We heard from, I don't even know how many at the end of the day, First Nations peoples discussing their struggles, their trials, their memories, their experiences, not just in terms of school, but most of it was related to school, but certainly just their lives in general. And it was incredibly powerful to hear some of those stories and the road that we still need to go down together in essentially carrying out a lot of what was committed to via truth and reconciliation. There were some students that came and spoke. There was, I'm trying to remember her name now, and I'm going to pause if I get this wrong. It wasn't Sarah Fox, but it's close. Serene Fox, thank you. And she was, again, very powerful, very moving about what it is that we need to do as trustees to improve not just our relationships with First Nations, but to also improve student outcomes. There was a signing of an MOU. I love all the abbreviations, an MOU between BCSTA and FNSEC. So to slow it all down a bit, it was a memorandum of understanding signed between the British Columbia Trustees Association and the First Nations Education Steering Committee. I think I've got that right. And really what that was about was that there were a number of items that have been agreed to that haven't been actioned. And I think that's really what the crux of this memorandum of understanding was sort of getting boots on the ground and getting things done that had been agreed to in the past. So it was great to see that come together. So I'm sure other trustees have lots they want to say too, so I don't want to sit here and talk about the whole weekend, but it was really, Friday was a really powerful, real powerful afternoon. And I felt privileged to be there. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Trustee Dixon.
Thank you, Chair Windsor. Today, we have been so busy. I actually haven't written this out in advance. So a quick warning to our administrative assistant, our executive assistant that helps us with this, that I will try to go slowly here, but I don't have this report written out. On April 8th, I attended the Canadian Schools Mental Health Association meeting, and our focus for that meeting was ACEs, that's Adverse Childhood Experiences, and the impact on brain development. This goes to the very earliest heart of trauma-informed practice. So that was a very interesting conversation to have nationally. And then moving ahead to the BCSTA conference, of course, Daniel has spoken well of the some of the key content, and I'd like to thank Superintendent Shepherd and Secretary Treasurer Nicola Christ for attending with us. And isn't it neat that we've already been delving into some of the recommendations and data with Superintendent Shepherd since the conference? You know, you've had a good conference if it's already sparking conversation 48 hours later and having you go through your work in a new way. So that's pretty powerful to see. We did this conference in a longhouse format. We really flipped around from the traditional style of meetings, and we did this meeting, especially the Thursday and the Friday, using the protocol of the First Nations whose lands we were meeting on. And that was powerful in of itself, instead of imposing the traditional structures. I guess on Thursday night, our keynote was Kendall Netmaker, if I got that name correct. And again, just the power of, for a young, shy child at school, to have educators that reached out, connected, and saw potential in a child. What a difference it's made to a successful entrepreneur, a leader in Indigenous reconciliation, and a powerful public speaker. And then I'll leave it off because I know there are other trustees with more to add. We elected a new executive, so our congratulations to Carol. Your name just left me.
Brody, yeah.
Thank you, from West Van, who's taking on the mantle of president. We had a great board elected alongside of her. We're just so pleased to see, such top quality people step forward for these positions of leadership. And our deepest thanks to outgoing president Stephanie Higginson, who did such an amazing job for us for 3 years. 3 years, the leadership that she evidenced, keeping the province and boards of education, keeping us together, moving forward through that pandemic, of course, was outstanding. But boy, the leadership she just evidences for education and the passion and power she has for students and for student learning. So her words of wisdom in every decision she makes is, how is this good for students? And how will this improve confidence in public education? And she did that in every piece of work that she approached. So our deepest thanks go to her for that. So that's my report.
Were you going to say anything about the DPAC meeting as well?
I do not have that report ready for you. I am so sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
So if you've got one, that would be great.
I have the title. I was thinking you might do it. That's okay. We're good. Trustee Kanakis.
Yes, thank you, Chair Windsor. Just prior to our meeting tonight, I attended an address by by Jo Krona, who's working with the district. She's a Tsimshian woman from Kitsin-Kalem, and her address was on the epistemic racism, bias, privilege to building a stronger education system. And essentially, she first of all challenged all educators to critically look at themselves and examine their biases, their attitudes, their beliefs, and then to facilitate change within themselves first. She then went on to talk about the difference between equality, equity, and then came back to the last piece, which is reality. Okay, what is actually going on in our system, and what can we do to affect that change? And so she went through the entire process. I won't go through the entire thing, but I know that many of our staff and were there listening, and hopefully we can move in that direction. The second one that I attended was with everybody else who was there was the BC STA conference, the AGM, and Open Hearts. I attended the Thursday session. And the Thursday session was essentially walking alongside or going home with the 215 missing children from the Kamloops residential school. And it was a very emotional time for everyone who was there. And especially for me, because I had gone to a different residential school, not myself, but to visit. It was Lejac, and it was between Burns Lake and Prince George. And I remember my wife and I going in and having a look at the building, which was raised at that point. And then we went around the back and we saw all these crosses. And they were the unmarked graves. Well, they were marked, but they were unidentified graves of all the students who did not survive the residential school process. So, that was sort of the beginning. And for that entire weekend, I was having a lot of difficulty because it brought back all those memories. When I went to the Friday session, it was sort of broken up into a number of segments, and it was done in the traditional longhouse fashion. But one of the purposes was to give us an understanding of Aboriginal culture, Indigenous culture, as we call it now. So they laid out that they were stewards of the land, how names were given, families, the matriarchal society that existed, how they learned in the past, and how these teachings were passed on from generation to generation in their oral history. And then with the residential schools and the loss of some of these children and parents and alcoholism and et cetera, it sort of has severed that particular piece. So I was having, as I said, difficulty with that. And then there was another session which dealt with, well, what was the effect of the residential schools on the individuals who were there? So we have children and grandparents who are separated. We have PSD for those people who were suffering the trauma, the physical reaction of going back to those buildings, the inability to walk into a school for some people, avoidance of the event, negative thoughts, the whole depression, hopelessness, single parents, et cetera, et cetera. So that part was, very powerful for me. And I was having, as I said, difficulty listening to it all. And then I want to relate just one part that sort of, it's very difficult to speak about, but it's the truth. And I guess that's one of the aspects of truth and reconciliation. We have to recognize the truth as it existed at the time. So it started off by a survivor talking about, being ripped away from his grandmother and parents and taken away. And then the little boy didn't understand what was going on. He was crying for his family. He figured he was in trouble. He went to Cooper Island Residential School. Now, if you don't know where Cooper Island is, it's across the bay from Cowichan. And he talked about standing there at night, looking out and seeing the light of Cooper Island. From Cooper Island, and seeing his home in Cowichan. And the more he cried, the more, people just ignored his plea for help. And in fact, he was yelled at, he was beaten, he was placed in the closet, essentially, until he stopped crying. And that's the story of a lot of residential children. Nobody knows how many children actually perish trying to swim from Cooper Island back to Cowichan. And so many of these children were in a dark place. And it's been the community that sort of stepped up and said, can we help them? This particular individual said, I was lost. But then an elder came along and said, I see something in you. And because of that, it gave him the confidence to move out of that period of depression. I guess the last thing I'll speak about was the one that Trustee Boisvert spoke about, and Saren, who spoke, and I was again taken by her courage, because it takes courage for you to speak about the events, but it also takes courage for us to hear the events. And all we can do is recognize what's happened and try and move forward. The first need is obviously to hear the story and then move us to reconciliation and healing. So I thank BCSTA and the whole conference, FINESC, and everything that put this on, because as I said, it's a very powerful presentation. And I thank you very much for allowing me to go there. And I do mean allowing me to witness what had happened there.
Yeah, it was indeed powerful. Trustee Dosanjh, did you have something to share as well?
Thanks, Chair Windsor. On April 14th, I, Chair Windsor, and Assistant Superintendent attended a DIAC meeting hosted by Delview. It was amazing feeling after a long time. So it was an in-person meeting, a different energy, different charms we noticed there. One thing I noticed, it was a little less attendance from the schools, but the Delview team talk about empathy, and the student talk about empathy in our school community, how they can educate others, and also discuss about grade 8 presentations. It was a very powerful presentation when they says the empathy is a feeling of people, what makes something better, understanding and share the feeling. It was just so nice to hear from that. Also, at the end part, I missed that meeting. I left earlier, but thanks, Chair Windsor, for filling me up. And they talked about in a group, which is the last part, breakout groups, a student talk about whether it was more important to be a good listener or to be a good speaker. Mm-hmm. At the end, they reported back to whole group, and they all agree that are both equally important. We should listen before we speak, and very healthy discussions. I'm so proud as a board member of all our students and their staff members. Thank you.
It was so good to see those kids in person, and Absolutely. They were so glad to see one another.
Yes,
just the buzz of activity. It was just
it was a totally different feeling.
Oh, what a difference from a Zoom meeting, right?
Awesome. Yeah, it was great.
Thank you so much. Well, just briefly, I'll mention that on April the 11th, DPAC at their meeting had a presentation from Rebecca Winthrop, who's from the Brookings Institution. And Shani, I'll send this to you because there's a lot, unfortunately. The topic was transforming education systems through family-school collaboration. And it was a wonderful presentation. There were some things that I was very surprised at. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. For example, when they polled parents and they polled teachers to see what they thought was most important in their child's education, the parents thought the teachers would say academics, and the teachers thought the parents would do the same, but it was the absolute reverse. It was more important that their children be happy and healthy and mentally stable than it was for them to get those straight A's. So that was quite an eye-opener to me. The whole purpose of this is to develop trusting relationships with our partner groups. And of course, parents are the first teachers that their kids have. So the whole idea of family engagement is to gain partners, because we want to work in partnership with parents. And it was an excellent evening. And then the next night, I went to the End the Stigma Forum. It was the opioid crisis. Superintendent Shepherd and Assistant Superintendents Bowman and Gordon were there, as well as a number of Delta staff. There were 3 speakers. One of them is Curtis Joe, who is a Delta School District youth worker, and he's a survivor. Dr. Malik Baxi, who's Fraser Health, and Guy Filicella, who's a motivational speaker and also a survivor. So they all spoke very powerfully about surviving crises and what's happening from mental health or from Fraser Health. They had a panel that included 4 speakers, including Kirsten Hermanson, who is the Delta School District Manager of Prevention and Wellness, TFN Counselor Katie Alexander, Sean Sesford, Delta Police Department Drug Division, and Cam Singh, who's the Mukti Society Substance Use Counselor. And so they each gave a presentation, and then they answered questions from the audience. And I was so, again, impressed with our employees, with Curtis and the powerful message he shared, and with Kirsten Hermanson, and the fact that she shared just what's happening in our school district, and the fact that we're trying to reach our grade 8, 9, and 10s when it comes to substance abuse and all the other ills that are happening these days. And just a couple of messages. People who use drugs are not defined by their drug use, or they shouldn't be defined by their drug use. We don't know why they're doing this. Many of the overdoses that are taking place are happening with people who are home alone. And workplaces also seem to have a high number of individuals who are overdosing. Punitive thinking by others can distort the reality of what's happening in someone's life. Negative opinions, and who knows what's going on. Anyways, then, and I went after the DIAC meeting with Trustee Dosanjh to Sands Secondary for a play, The Addams Family. It was so great. The school, the drama department, the staff and students put on just a fabulous play. You could just tell how excited they were to be performing before a live audience, and they did an incredible job. On yesterday, I had an opportunity to travel with Superintendent Shepherd to tour the schools that I am the trustee liaison for. So the first time in 2 years, I've been into those schools as well. We went to English Bluff, Holly, Sands, and Hellings. And each school is as unique and special as the students who learn in them and the staff who work with their students. It was a wonderful experience. And today, again, another youth opportunity. Wow, they just keep coming. It's wonderful. I went to the Delta Youth Leadership Conference at North Delta Rec Center. It started at 9 o'clock. I arrived at 1 o'clock, and it was a joint event between the City of Delta, Delta Police Department, and the Delta School District. There were well over 200 students in attendance today. The Elder Rose Guerin and Nathan Kanakwak Wilson opened the day, and Mayor Harvey brought greetings from the city. So I understand that the morning was absolutely awesome. And apparently a dance party broke out because 2 of the presenters were a DJ and her partner, and the topic was mental health. So needless to say, the DJ, who is a female, the first female for the Vancouver Canucks, they would play music in between their presentation, and the kids stood up and danced. Why not? Should have some fun while you're dealing with that. And interestingly enough, their inspirational presentation was keynote speaker Kendall Netmaker. Kendall was the speaker that we had at the BC STA conference on Thursday. So, I mean, he knocked their socks off with the message that he gave. It was motivational and powerful, as he was with us on the Thursday night. So when I got there, students were separated into breakout groups to do deep dives into topics that were raised during today's session. A couple of, or 2 or 3 of them, the impact of COVID on youth, substance abuse, How does social media affect you? Intergenerational trauma and racism, and more. Then the youth leaders, just like a DIAC meeting, brought the information back from the groups that they were in charge of and summarized what was going on. And then Kendall Netmaker summarized the day. I had the pleasure of representing the board and saying a very few brief remarks, believe it or not. It was a fabulous day. And the three organizations did an awesome job. Apparently they've been working on this for 6 months. And Kirsten Hermanson deserves kudos for all the effort that she's put into it, as well as all the rest of the staff who did it. And that's enough for me. It's been so good seeing kids. Did I say that? Oh, okay. So we're getting fairly close to the last couple of items on tonight's agenda. So here we are. Following this, we're going to move into the question period after we have dealt with these last two items. And so we'll start with our any questions from our education partners in the media who are participating via Zoom conference call. We'll then move on to questions submitted electronically. So this is a final reminder. If you are watching the live stream on YouTube and would like to ask a question about items on the agenda, please make sure you send them to us before the question period begins. And they go to questions@deltaschools.ca. So there is a short time delay between when we speak and when it's broadcast on the live stream. So by the time you see and hear me saying these words, I'll have already moved to the final agenda item. Please don't delay in emailing us your questions to ensure that we receive them prior to the start of the question period. Thank you very much. Okay, field trip. Superintendent Shepherd, are you doing that?
I am. Thank you, Chair Windsor. It has been over 2 years since I brought a field trip forward to the board as per Administrative Procedure 260. These are overnight multiple day field trips out of province. And so it's somewhat understandable why I haven't brought any forward to you in the last 2 years. But we have two schools that have who presented to the board at the last meeting about their success in robotics. Both a group from Siacom and a group from Burnsview will be traveling to Texas, Dallas, Texas, at the beginning of May to participate in the VEX World Championships. And these youth are being joined by a number of staff from both schools, as well as some family members. All costs will be covered by fundraising, students' parents, and I believe there were some sponsors as well. So again, two trips going to the same location from two of our outstanding program schools in robotics, and they will join kids from across North America and the world for these championships.
Thank you. And those two schools are Siacom and Burnsview. Right. Yeah. Impressive that they've qualified for world championships. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Secretary Treasurer Nicola Christ for the Budget 2022-23 process update.
Thank you, Chair Windsor. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and let everybody know, especially also while public members and stakeholders are listening, what the next steps are in our new and revised budget process, so that everybody has an early understanding of what's yet to come and can consider what to attend and what to expect. So I wanted to say, first of all, that this week on Thursday, so that's April 28th, there will be the budget media release published. This information will also be shared on our website and via news media. So you will have access to that. And on May 3rd, so that's next Tuesday, we'll have the public input at the online board meeting at that time. And there's an opportunity, of course, for the public to provide their input into the budget at that particular meeting. And simultaneously this year, which we have not done before, we will provide a budget survey that will be made available for those who wish to provide their input in that particular manner, either instead or in addition to the May 3rd public meeting input. And the instructions there again to access the survey and to provide the feedback will be available on our website and will be also made available via news media on April 28th. And while I'll have a few more things to share, this completes the usual budget process that we've become used to for the past few years. But this year is a little bit different. So in addition to this, under our new budget engagement process, there are still 2 other items to come. So the first item is that we will be sharing the district's plan on how to support the 22-23 budget through the accumulated operating surplus funds. And that is scheduled to come to the May 10th public board meeting. And then in addition to that, there's also going to be the 3-year, so the multi-year budget report. That's a new item as well. And that item gives a detailed management analysis and review of the 2022-23 budget and the impact on the next 2 years, all else remaining equal, that is, of course. And that is scheduled to come to the June 7th public meeting, where also the final budget package will be approved in its entirety with all the new items that belong with it. And the public input process in the form of the budget survey that I've just mentioned will remain open throughout this additional period of time so that people can continue to provide their feedback and suggestions to this new process and the information that's being shared. And of course, all submissions are welcome and gratefully appreciated. And this is where my presentation ends. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a brand new world for us when it comes to new budgets and new financing and trying to understand what's requested of us. So thank you to Nicola Chris, Secretary Treasurer, and her staff for all the work they've done to interpret what's being asked and to provide more than above and beyond. Okay, so now, are there any questions from our education partners or media who are participating via the Zoom conference call? Not seeing any hands or any persons. Okay, so how about questions from members of the public? Catherine Tucker, Director of Communications, who is joining us via Zoom, has been charged with gathering questions submitted to the email address, as quoted, questions@deltaschools.ca. I keep wanting to go back to that other one. Anyways, Catherine, can you please let us know if there are any questions that have been submitted?
There are no questions this evening, Chair Windsor.
Thank you so much. Okay. So shall we wait about 30 seconds just in case somebody throws something in it or submits something at the last minute? Just give it a quick little 30-second time for a breather, whatever. Okay, and this would end question period. Our next scheduled meeting is May 3rd, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. where it will be budget and people will have an opportunity to give some comments for sure. Trustees, could I please have someone move adjournment of the meeting? Trustee Dixon and seconded Trustee Dosan. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you all for joining us this evening and have a good week. And we'll see hopefully most of you again next week at this time. Take care. Bye now.
Good night.
Good night.